I'm at the University of Twente and I'm going to give a webinar on the topic of cyborgs. So next you will see this video where I talk about what is a cyborg, what are theories and philosophies, what are cyborg technologies, what are famous or remarkable cyborgs, and I will share my vision on our cyborg future. Welcome. Let me start with a story. It's the year 1990 and I'm 6 years old and I'm going to a party. And at this party I have to be dressed up. And there I come and there are my friends dressed up like pirates, like princesses, like skeletons, like kings. And I feel a little embarrassed because my mother, she made cardboard boxes and she made me into a sort of robot, as you can see right here. And to make things even worse, I even tried to have a robot accent. And I also tried to do gestures just like a robot. And I should tell you, this was even before dancing like a robot was even a thing. So I was way up in front of my time, as you can say. And what's really remarkable now, more than 20 years later, I'm actually also partly cyborg. And I will explain that later, but as Stijn also introduced, I'm a full-time keynote speaker. I give webinars on the topics of biohacking, human enhancement, human augmentation, and I also make videos on my YouTube channel where sometimes I interview experts and other times I also get into gadgets and wearables and new devices myself. So near the end of this presentation I will also share a link. Well, this is why I'm a cyborg futurist, and if you do not like needles, please look the other way, because I have implanted a tiny chip in my hand and I use that chip now to have my contact information on it. So if you have a smartphone and you come across me at the street, you can scan my chip and then you got my contact information. Well, that's one example of being a cyborg, and during this presentation I will also share some other ideas, concepts and cyborg technologies. But I want to start with a couple of theories and philosophies. And I want you to imagine that you're living in the 1950s and you're looking upwards towards the sky. And remember, this is before 1961. That was the year that Yuri Gagarin was the first person to be in outer space, and also before 1969, when Neil Armstrong puts his boot on the moon. So we were totally not aware how it will be to be in outer space. How can we survive there? And that led two famous scientists, Nathan Klyne and Manfred Clines, to come up with this paper published in 1958 called Cyborgs in Space. And they propose a radical idea. So they say altering man's bodily function to meet the requirements of an extraterrestrial environment will be more logical than providing an earthly environment for him in space. So they say you should not change the moon or Mars or a rocket to be suitable for us as humans, but you have to change the humans so they can survive in outer space. And for that idea, to change humans with the use of technology, that it will be an integral part of the astronaut, they propose the term cyborg. So this is where the first definition originated of the term cyborg. So that was 1958. Now fast forward to 1985. And that was the year that the feminist philosopher Donna Haraway, she's on the picture, she published her landmark essay called The Cyborg Manifesto. And the Cyborg Manifesto, you should know that it was written in an era of the internet, that the internet was gaining popularity, and there was a lot of fear that the use of internet and other technologies will be driven by nationalistic, commercial or even military motives. But Haraway made the point that no, we should not be scared of technology, but we should embrace it. And we are now entering an era where there are no strict boundaries anymore between men and women, between humans and animals, but also between humans and technology. And for one, she also mentioned a pacemaker or a hearing implant. So we are more used to using technology inside our bodies. So that's 1985. Now fast forward again to 2011. And in that year, Amber Case, she had her famous TED Talk with the title, "We are all cyborgs now." And she made a really compelling statement that you can also look at cyborgs not like integrating technology or electronics or mechanics inside the body, but our current usage of smartphones, of computers, or the internet already does make us cyborgs. So also you're watching it right now via a smartphone or a tablet or a computer, and you are also dependent on technology, so you are already a cyborg. And I don't know, what's the last time, if you even remember that you actually forgot your smartphone? Think about it. How did it make you feel? Well, for me, the last time that happened, I was feeling like I was missing a limb or an arm or at least some bodily part. So I can really feel the argument that she made that we are already cyborgs now. But what's also interesting concerning the theory of cyborgs is that besides the work of Clines and Haraway and Amber Case, that if you look at scientific literature, there's not a lot of mentioning of the term cyborgs, mostly about human enhancement, human augmentation, maybe certain technologies like neurotechnology. But there's one area in which the term cyborg is being used a lot, and that's of course in movies and series. So I'm curious, I want to start a poll for you guys. So I want to know who is your favorite cyborg. And just to give you an idea, I have 4 options. And I'm going to watch a clip.
RoboCop.
This guy is really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
Something darker.
We're asking people we don't know to risk their lives.
Strong man is strongest alone. You ever heard that?
I'll have to face them head on. I'm gonna need you to stand way back.
Tonight is not a game. It is a hunt.
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
So there are 4 cyborgs, and there are of course more if you look at other movies and series, but these are 4 cyborgs I really enjoy. RoboCop, that's the first option. Cyborg, and I must admit this is a cyborg of the Justice League in the DC universe, and you saw a small clip of him besides Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. Or is it C, Alita Battle Angel, or is it D, the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. And I get the results. So most of you think Terminator, and then also RoboCop and Alita, and Cyborg, actually with the name Cyborg, is on the 3rd place. As an extra anecdote, there's a lot of debate on the internet if Terminator is a cyborg or not, because his quote is, "I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over metal endoskeleton." And there are also people say, well, because he's fully metal, he only has a skin of a human, he's actually an android. But yeah, if you want to nerd out on that, please go ahead and leave a comment in the chat. But thank you for your replies and your answers, of course. And also, if you have another favorite cyborg who's not in this list, please type it in the chat. All right. So we started with theories, and now I'm going to talk about a couple of technologies, cyborg technologies. And well, I want to do a small exercise. I want you to feel your heartbeat. So use your fingers. You can do it over here or do it like in your neck. And then you want to feel your heartbeat. Do-doom, do-doom, do-doom. And it's really astonishing because in an average lifetime, your heart beats 2 billion times. But sometimes, yeah, there's a malfunction in the beating of the heart. And this is a picture from 1959, so it's around the same time as Klyne and Clines published their publication on cyborgs. And here you can see Rune Arne, Ake Sanning, and Arne Larsson. And there are 3 men from Sweden. So if there's somebody from Sweden watching right now, I'm sorry if I butchered the names of Ake, Rune, and Arne. And Ake Sanning is a surgeon, is an engineer, Rune is a surgeon, and on the right you can see Arne Larsson. And at that, when this picture has been taken, he's 43 years old. And he has a deadly virus that will cause him to die in a couple of days because that virus infected his heart. So what happened? And this is a real story. Rune and Ake, the surgeon and the engineer, they made the first prototype of a pacemaker at the kitchen sink. And then they implanted it in the chest of Arne Larsson. And they also had to replace the batteries of the first pacemaker after 2 hours. So that was really like a do-it-yourself kind of vibe, I guess, during that time. But what's really astonishing is that in the year 2002, Arne Larsson, he died at age 86. But at that time, he had his 26th version of a pacemaker in his body. 26th version. And what's even also more remarkable is that he lived longer than his saviors, Rune and Ake. So I think this pacemaker, like I also mentioned concerning the Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway, is an amazing cyborg technology that really improves the lives of so many people in the world. So this is the story of the pacemaker. And another story is the story of Jeroen. This is Jeroen, and I talked with him as an interview for my second book. And Jeroen, at the age of 15, he started to notice that he was able not to see that much anymore. And he got diagnosed with a disease called retina pigmentosa, which means that his eyesight started to deteriorate. And so now he can only see near the edges, only some flickering of black and white. And then a couple of years ago, he volunteered for an experimental procedure. And as you can see in the picture, he has glasses with a camera. And that camera transmits its signals of what the camera sees to a chip in his eyeball. And that chip is connected to the endings of the nerve cells that go to the visual cortex. And now with this camera glasses and the chip in his eyeball, Jeroen can see again with 30 pixels, some black and white. And it's really astonishing because I talked to him like, what can you do with this kind of technology? And he states, well, I can go skiing again, but as you can also see in this video, he can also do ridiculous parkour stunts where he jumps off all kinds of things in the park and, and in the city. And yeah, this is, I think, an amazing example, just like the pacemaker, where we use cyborg technologies to really improve the quality of someone's life. But these are two examples in which patients are already being used. But what are some future developments? Well, this is an article from a couple of weeks ago, and it's about the researchers at the Northwestern University. And they got a grant from DARPA. And DARPA is a sort of, they work on innovation and science projects for the US military. And its predecessors were also involved in development of the internet and GPS. So yeah, they have quite a track record. And this article is about a so-called living pharmacy. So they're working on a sort of implant that works subdermal, so it gets under your skin by 1 centimeter by 3 centimeters, so it's a little implant. And it works with electronics, and they say with genetically modified light-sensitive cells. And then it should work in this way that it can extract certain pharmaceuticals and certain medicine to the body. And the main advantage, of course, is that you don't have to carry around a box of pills, but the medicine is always with you, and you can also change it, and like you need at that moment. And they say they want to use it to fight jet lag, or maybe when a soldier has diarrhea. And of course, that's really interesting because the research also state that they want to develop this technology, like one day in the future, that people with diabetes can also use this kind of application, this chip, where you don't need to have the needle and the insulin anymore, but it's just part of your human body, just like in the definition of Clines and Klyne. But it also makes me think, does the army also want to use it for other purposes? Like if it's of a benefit on the battlefield when a soldier is awake for, I don't know, 5 days in a row, or if he or she has like mega ultra sharpness and focus. That's also a main advantage. So the application of these kinds of technologies is concerning also ethical questions, and maybe we also need to think of cyborg ethics, like for what kind of applications and purposes do we want to use these technologies, and also who decides about it, and also when you leave the US military, do you have to keep the chip or other things? So these are all moral important questions, and I will get back to these kinds of questions at the end of my presentation. So if you think that the stories of Arne and Jeroen and the implantable living pharmacy are already astonishing, fasten your seatbelts, because I'm going to share 3 cyborg technologies that are really remarkable. But before we do that, let's do a small exercise. And I want you to think about a cup of coffee you had this morning, or maybe if you're in another time zone, you're taking a sip right now. Think about how it tastes. Maybe you can hear the coffee machine, or if you like tea, think about tea. How does it smell? Also, how does it feel like in your hands, a warm cup of coffee? And also, how do you use all your senses when you have a warm drink? Like tasting, like seeing, like hearing, like feeling. These are all senses we have. But what if we can come up with new senses for the human body? Well, one of the creatives in this domain is Ribas. And I interviewed Moon for my YouTube channel, and she's the one in the middle. And Moon is does have a special kind of implant that gives her extra senses. So what did she do? She has a sort of vibrating device under her feet, and that is connected to her smartphone. And she gets a notification on the smartphone when there's somewhere around the world when there's an earthquake there. And also, when the more intense an earthquake is, the more intense the vibration in her feet is. And in that way, she says she's connected to the seismic activities of the world. So that's, of course, all really remarkable that such an artist really gives us a lot of imagination about possible new senses. And what's also really cool, I think, is she's also a performance artist. She's a dancer, and she has a performance with the title "Waiting for Earthquakes." And that means what the title is, what it says, because you can buy a ticket for her performance, and then she stands on stage, and then when there's an earthquake somewhere around the world, she gets the vibration in her feet, and then she starts to dance. And the more intense the earthquake, the more intense the vibration, the more intense she starts to dance. I'm not a dancer, as you can see. So, indeed, I think what you are thinking, if you bought a ticket and you're there, you're sitting there in the audience, and then at that moment there are no earthquakes around the world, you can just see her standing on stage for, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours. So I really like the work of such a creative, where she uses these cyborg technologies to give us new senses. So that's the first example. A second example is the Pegleg. And the Pegleg is a quite larger kind of implant relative to my implant in my hand. And it's also an implant you should put in your leg. I'm not quite sure why. I think it has to do with the size of this implant. But this implant can contain 36 gigabytes of information, and also can serve as a node in a mesh network. So I think that's an interesting application, that you don't have to carry a USB stick anymore, or it's just part of your human body, that you have movies or books or series or papers always with you. And for the real diehard science fiction fans, this really makes me think of a movie with Keanu Reeves called Johnny Mnemonic. You can search it later after this webinar. And in that movie, he's also a data smuggler. But in that movie, the chip with data, it's not in his leg, but it's actually in his head. But I think that's a tangent. We can go there if you have questions about that. So that's the second example about the Pegleg. And the third example is, a remarkable one. And that's one of the biohackers called Rich Lee. And Rich Lee was thinking, there are some bodily parts which would also be interesting to augment with cyborg technology. So now for a couple of years, he is working on to insert vibrating elements inside his genitals. So his mission in life is also to become the first human vibrator. Well, that's a cyborg technology I would not volunteer for, but I'm curious, maybe there's someone in the audience that likes this kind of application. All right, so if you remember, I talked about theories and philosophies, and of course I talked about the different technologies, the pacemaker and the visual aid, and I talked about some remarkable cyborgs that are already living here on planet Earth. And I want to end with my vision. And my vision is, I again want to start with a small exercise, because I want you to think about what's the last moment that you remember that you smiled. So take a moment. When was the last time that you smiled? Well, my prediction is that it probably had little to do with a cyborg technology. At least for me, when I think of the last moment that I smiled, well, it had something to do with my girlfriend or friends or fellow students or even with my cat, I think. So our sense of feeling good in life probably has to do with human interaction. And that's also my vision. So I think we need to think about the question, like if we increase the cyborg technologies in our lives, we also, as a sort of counterbalance, also need to be aware of what makes us human. So what are our human skills? And like I mentioned, we also need to be critical, like the example of the implant by the US military. Do we want these kinds of applications of these technologies to actually happen in our world? And we also need imagination. And Einstein, to quote Einstein, Einstein's quote is, imagination is more important than knowledge. And why do we need that imagination? Because we need creativity and imagination to come up with visions and scenarios of the future, where, again, we use these cyborg technologies to increase the quality of life on Earth. Think of the examples of the pacemaker and of Jeroen, and also to increase human flourishing. So we can smile more because we are healthy for a longer period of time and we reduce suffering in the world. That would be my vision. And for that I think that these are all skills like critical thinking, like imagination, like creativity. There is no cyborg technology for that. There is no app for that. There is no implant for that. And I also think that will stay that for a long period of time, that these are really human skills. And I think it's really important that we also develop these kinds of human skills: imagination, creativity, empathy. And that also, to come back full circle, makes me think of the 6-year-old Peter that went to the little party where he was dressed up as a robot. And I still have fond memories of that party. And that was not per se because of my outfit, but also because of the creativity that especially my mother had in building such a great uniform, that she also was not aware that more than 20 years later, I will make my living giving keynotes and webinars on the topics of cyborgs. So if you are interested in this topic and you want to be aware of what's heading our way, you can go to my website. There I share a blog, I write a newsletter, and I also make videos.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Very nice presentation. Very enthusiastic. It was very nice energy. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. So one thing I was immediately thinking about is you mentioned the pacemaker and that it had so many different editions over the life of that one person's lifetime. And when I read the news about, for example, Neuralink and some other types of technologies, and they're talking about their first phase yet, it makes me think about how much longer it might take before we actually get there at some point.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think in the case of Neuralink, which is like a neural implant, in which is quite famous because Elon Musk is one of the investors or owners, I think. And yeah, I think part of their marketing is, of course, they want to have people lined up to have access to their first edition. But yeah, I think history will learn us a lot of lessons. So indeed, and when I read about the story of Arne Larsson with his 26th version of the pacemaker, I think I would not volunteer for the first version of the Neuralink implant. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe if it was life or death, maybe you would, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, one question that we always somewhat ask, that people always are a bit worried about these cyborg attachments or these things we add to our body. How accepting do you think people are to human enhancement? Because you've met with a lot of people, you've talked in front of large audiences. How accepting are people usually? How open-minded are they to getting an implant themselves?
Well, that actually depends. So I come at a lot of places, especially before COVID. When I give talks for student groups, most of the time they're more willing to accept these kinds of enhancements. But what I also like is there are also different factors that come into play. So I think in general you cannot say that I'm in favor of enhancement or against enhancement, but it has to do with a certain technology, but also with the what's the goal of a certain enhancement. So there was also a survey a couple of years ago in the Netherlands where they asked, like, if you have a sort of chip, would we allow it in Europe or the Netherlands or in the world to be used for like that a surgeon could perform his or her job better? Then a lot of people were in favor. And then, can we use the same type of chip for a sniper to aim better? And then there are a lot of people against it. So I think it's also context dependent.
Yeah, for sure. Because, for example, the chip you have in your hand, that's just to show who you are, for example.
Yeah, but I can program it also for other applications. So I also, for one time, I had like my Bitcoin wallet on it. I think that's pretty fun.
Oh, yeah.
But it also cannot contain a large sum of information. So it's not like the Pegleg with 36 gigabytes, but it contains, I think, 128 kilobytes, I think.
Yeah.
So it's like the same kind of technology that are in pets, like they insert it in pets when they are lost. I can do different things, and for me that's also important because I also get a question. So I think I'm not willing to have a chip when my employer is asking me or institution or my parents, but I make my own decision to have this implant. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The next question is a bit maybe X-Men inspired, where you have people who are mutations and people who don't. So basically the question is, will cyborgs create a divide between those who are enhanced and those who aren't?
Great question.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the main critiques concerning, if you talk about any human enhancement, human augmentation, or cyborg technologies, is that right now we also already have a great divide, inequality in the world between wealthy and also Western countries and non-Western countries, and there are a lot of other divides. And one of the main fears also stated by, for example, maybe some of the viewers are aware of the work of Professor Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote the book Homo Deus, which is quite literally like you have Homo sapiens and later you have Homo Deus. So I think that's a valid concern because returning to your first question about Neuralink, probably I think if you look at how I don't have a Tesla, by the way, but the first Teslas are really expensive with the idea stated that they could sort of then can use that fund to improve their production facilities, and then the Teslas will become more cheap. And there's also some ideas they could have the same strategy concerning the Neuralink. And you might say, well, that's a good thing, because then after a couple of years, then people who are not that wealthy can use a Neuralink, because then the costs are down. But the main fear of people like Harari is that they say, well, when you start using an enhancement or cyborg technology, then you're off the races. And then, you cannot catch up anymore. So, I think that's still a valid concern. And that I think also has more to do with our political ideas. And it's not really a technology question, more sociology or political question.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good book to read, Homo Deus. Yeah, it's amazing. Are you thinking to make any other alterations to your body?
Well, I'm planning to have the chip I have right now. I cannot pay with it, so I'm planning to have another chip which also can serve as a sort of credit card. I think that I think that's a funny application. Like instead of paying with your card, or you can also pay with your smartphone, right? Or with your smartwatch, I want to pay with my hand. I think that's an interesting application. But I should also say that it's not really a killer feature. So when I also talk to other people, I don't know, do you want to have a chip to pay?
Well, I don't see the big benefit in it over my phone.
Yeah.
It's like a couple seconds maybe to pull out my phone, and I don't think that's worth it.
Yeah, and that's a response I really understand, and I get it a lot. I want to use it because I think I'm a human guinea pig, and I want to try it, and then also experience it, and then I also, of course, it's my profession to talk about it. But I can really feel that it's not like a unique function that such an implant has concerned of relative to smartphone or other means. So And one other thing, by the way, is there's also some ideas about, for example, that you have an implantable mobile phone. There's a movie I saw recently, but that also makes me think, like, when you want to have an upgrade of your phone, do you still have to go to a clinic and then get your first phone out and the new one in? So I think. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're really heading that way.
Yeah, I'm thinking a bit like the same way that we're switching to online classes or online presentations. We don't want to stick to the traditional form that we presented. We want to change it, to update it for the system. We don't want to just take what we had before and then try to make it fit with the other one. In the same sense of, like, we have smartphones now, but maybe they should find a different way, not to try to put in the same box, I mean.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. More has to do with with our current paradigms about how technology works, and then we want to translate it to an implantable one. Yeah, but I think it's an interesting remark that maybe we have to change function and look at it in all different ways. So it's a good idea.
Yeah. So in your talk, you also mentioned the pacemaker, that then every 2 hours you have to get a new battery in. So someone asked us, how do these augmented technologies get power from a battery, or how exactly?
Well, I'm not actually aware how a pacemaker, I think it's got a small battery, but to talk, for example, about my chip, it has like NFC technology, near field communication. So the moment I read it, it also sends the power to the chip. So, but that's also when I read articles about the Neuralink implant, for example, and also their competitors, that's really one of the main challenges they face right now. So how indeed do you need to power up these devices? But I also saw a publication, I think last week, that there are also some researchers that are looking about how can we use human movement and maybe also human warmth to also to power up these devices. So that could be an opportunity, but I don't think in like 5 years, probably be farther away in the future.
Yeah, this question is exactly actually what I was thinking. Why would you want to have these chips internal? It seems more like a health risk, and also the option to go back. Is there an option to go back afterwards?
Well, in my case, there is. I just can go to the piercing shop, so you don't get it at your general practitioner, but you go to the piercing shop. So there is a way back, but it makes me think of Dick Cheney. Do you still know who Dick Cheney is?
No, actually no.
I think it's he was the vice president under George W. Bush.
Okay.
There was also a recent movie on Netflix.
Yes.
Yeah. And the really remarkable character also concerning the war in Iraq. But I will not go
that
there.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing, and that makes me think. The question really makes me think of that is that he also had a pacemaker, and at one time he also disconnected the connection of the Bluetooth connection of the pacemaker, because he was afraid that terrorists or other people would hack his pacemaker. And there's actually a hacker, Barnaby Jack, who also proved it a year or something after Dick Cheney made a statement that he disconnected his pacemaker. Like, you can really put a high voltage, or I don't know exactly how it works, on a pacemaker, and then somebody dies of the malfunction of a pacemaker, and it's actually a hacker. So that's really, I think, the more vital, but that also concerns, of course, self-driving cars or other technologies you talk about during this summer school. I think the more we also leave to technology, in which technology is the main force, that we also indeed need to be aware about the risk of hackers.
Yeah.
Like and for the fans, there's also, spoiler alert, there's also a scene in the series Homeland, also concerning a pacemaker that has been hacked. So.
Yeah, that's why you really need to have reliability when you start putting it into humans, especially, for example, a case of where they don't really trust all these new technologies. For example, the nuclear facilities in the US where they have nuclear weapons, they're actually fully disconnected from any outside sources. So there's all analog computers instead of digital computers to avoid someone doing something wrong and then causing a bomb to go off. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. So last question. What is a message you would like to just share to our participants about, maybe give them inspirational words or something about maybe they should get an implant or
Wow. Well, I think I would stick with my final comments also during my presentation. So I think the most participants who are now involved in this summer course at the University of Twente, so they're mostly, I think, interested in new technology in the future. And I think it's important that you are aware of all the technical skills, like what's the name again? The STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. But you also need to work, I think, that's also a challenge for me, by the way, on your human skills, like creativity, originality, reciprocity, empathy. Yeah. So also work on yourself. But I think also in the CuriousU program, there are also some I think personal growth or personal development elements. So I think that's really good. So continue with that. Thank you for watching this video. Please do not forget to subscribe to my channel down below. Also leave a comment about what do you think about our cyborg future, or what is your favorite cyborg movie. And you can go to my website if you want to have in-depth knowledge on the topic of cyborgs or human enhancement or biohacking or human augmentation. There I share in-depth knowledge, and you can also find a free download. And also, if you want to hire me for a virtual keynote or webinar, you can also find these links down below. And I hope to see you in the future.